There are moments that seem to last only a few seconds, but they can split a person's life in two. A good, talented black teenager on the way to realizing his dream. A flight attendant, the one who is given the power to ensure the safety of passengers, uses that same power to take the light from his eyes. Not with fists, not with words, but with the cold pull of a taser. At that moment, if it were you standing in the cramped cabin of the plane witnessing the boy collapse, blood flowing through his fingers, what would you do? Would you run over, or would you be stunned? And if the victim was your child? Life sometimes puts us in unexpected choices, but the way we choose will speak volumes about our character. Before we begin this story, a story about pain, about justice, and about the silent strength of a father, if you feel that values such as kindness, equality, and the voice of the disadvantaged deserve to be heard, please like, share, and $. Subscribe to the channel, because only when you stay, this story will have real meaning. That morning, the sky over Ridgebrook was as blue as ever. The early March sunlight shone through the tall windows of Ridgebrook International Airport, creating long streaks of light on the gray bricks. People leisurely pulled their suitcases, the sound of wheelchairs mixed with the loudspeaker announcements making the space a familiar everyday harmony. There was no indication that a few hours later an event would occur big enough to ground an airline, brutal enough to rob a teenager of his sight, and powerful enough to turn a normally calm father into a storm waiting to explode. But every story starts with something small. A cup of coffee stirred too hard, a slower than usual walk, a look distorted by prejudice. And this time it all started with a worn-out backpack. Noah Carter, 16, stood in the Atlantic Vista Airlines check-in area, his knuckles turning white as he clutched his backpack. He wasn't usually a nervous person, but today was special. Today he was flying to Boston for the most important audition of his life, the audition for young talent at the prestigious Brighton Conservatory. There was nothing expensive in his backpack, except a stack of paper, the original music he had written over the course of 3 months. The first song he had ever composed, born from the hard but loving life he shared with his father. He always said that the song was like a key not to open the door to fame, but to open the door for the world to see who he really was. Noah took a deep breath. His gray hoodie was lightly worn, his jeans were old, his sneakers had lasted him all year. He didn't look like the kid who usually hung around first class. And that made him stand up straighter, a reminder not to bow his head. The phone vibrated in his pocket. The screen showed the name Dad. "Are you at the airport, Jeremiah?" Carter's voice was always low, slow, and steady, the kind of voice you could lean on. "Yes, I'm getting ready to go to the waiting area. Remember to keep the music safe. And remember, don't let anyone touch your backpack." His son was not a loser. His warning was meant to remind him not to fumble, not to be embarrassed by other people's eyes. Because Jeremiah knew that such eyes would always be there, lookings of judgment, suspicion, and sometimes rejection just because of the color of his skin. Noah smiled, though his heart was still beating fast. "Yes, I remember." "Good. Are you okay?" The question was simple but contained the concern of a father who had spent decades working almost non-stop to raise his child. "It's fine. I think it's fine." Noah smiled slightly, then continued, "Honestly, I'm a little scared, but I'll do it." Jeremiah paused for a moment as if considering something. "Fear isn't the enemy, Noah. It just reminds you how important what you're doing is." That statement warmed Noah's heart. For a moment he forgot he was just a black boy from the working-class neighborhood of South Ridgebrook. He remembered himself as Noah, the one who worked hard every night. Noah, the one his father was proud to call his son. Noah, the one about to embark on a new journey. "Call me when you get on the plane." "Yes. I love you, Dad." "I love you too." The call ended, but the warmth remained. The airport was bustling. People walked past Noah without looking back. He liked the feeling of being just one of the people. No one looked at him for too long. No one judged. No one asked too many questions. He likes that simple peace. But peace only lasts until he steps into the first lounge area of Atlantic Vista. The first person to look at him, not the receptionist, not the passenger, was Linda Myers, the chief flight attendant of the flight he was about to board. Her gaze traveled from his face down to his hoodie to his worn-out shoes. It was long, cold, and meaningful. The look reminded Noah of his childhood, the white professor in music class looking at him and asking, "Are you sure this is the right music for you, Jazz? It has emotion." Noah was silent that day. But today he didn't want to be silent anymore. He stood up straight, walked forward, presented the ticket, smiled politely. It seemed like everything would go smoothly. But the world does not rotate as people wish. Noah had no idea. In just a few hours, everything he knew about the world, about justice, about injustice, and about the power of a father's love would change forever. That morning, amid the creaking of suitcase wheels and the cold crystal lights of the Ridgebrook International Airport lobby, Noah stood still for a long time by the glass door. He watched the people passing by, still holding the strap of his backpack tightly, as if embracing his own little world. Outside, although the sun had risen, the air was still a bit chilly enough for Noah to pull his gray hoodie up close to his neck. He didn't know that a few people around him were looking at him suspiciously. A black boy, alone, an old backpack, worried eyes. It was not an uncommon sight in airports, but it was rare to see him in the area before entering first class. Noah knew that. He felt those looks like needles touching his skin. But today he decided not to bow his head. He took a deep breath as if to pull all his courage into his chest. And then memories of his father slowly returned, quietly, just like the gentle background music he had known all his life. Jeremiah Carter was not a man of many words. He was not the type to hug his son in the morning or give him lengthy instructions before he left the house. He was the classic American father, more work than sleep, less talk than he meant to be, and love with actions more than words. Noah always saw that image when he was a child. The image of a tall black man whose shoulders always smelled of oil, then changed to the smell of new business shirts. But no matter what smell, those hands were always open when Noah needed them. Their apartment in South Ridgebrook wasn't big. There were 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and an old amber grand piano. The piano wasn't fancy. Some of the keys were scratched, some of the strings sometimes sounded out of tune, but Noah loved it like a true friend. It was where he learned to play his first pieces of music, where he cried when he missed his mother, where he realized that music could heal hearts even with just a few notes. One evening 3 years ago, Noah asked his father, "Do you think I can really become a musician?" Jeremiah was fixing a broken chair. He stopped, took off his glasses, and looked at his son for a long time. He only said one sentence, but that sentence has followed Noah to this day. You don't have to be anyone else. Just be yourself and let the music do the rest. Noah never forgot that voice. It was deep, steady, not promising anything big, but it made you feel enough. Back in the present, Noah entered the security area. He showed his boarding pass. The agent scanned the code, looked up at him a little longer than usual. Not a bad look, just the familiar surprised look. "First class, huh?" His voice was soft, but it made Noah pause. Yes." Noah tried to smile. The clerk nodded, returned the ticket, and said nothing more. But the question reminded Noah of the times his father had told stories about his youth. Back then, Jeremiah was not yet a CEO, just a young engineer. He once said, "Once I went to a meeting in Chicago. They thought I was in the wrong room. I stood outside the door for 5 minutes just to remind myself that I had the right to come in." Noah was young then and asked only one question, "Are you scared?" Jeremiah smiled, but the smile did not hide the bitterness. "Yes, but I still went in." Do you know why Noah shook his head? Jeremiah put his hand on his son's shoulder and squeezed gently. Because sometimes, in order for people to believe you belong somewhere, you have to believe it first. Today, Noah is walking through his own door, but fear still clings to his neck like a cold breath. Atlantic Vista's first lounge check-in area is spacious and bright. Dark brown leather chairs, low glass tables, and a light scent of peppermint oil. People sit reading newspapers, drinking lattes, opening laptops, like people accustomed to waiting for flights in comfort. Noah walked in. Immediately, he felt out of place, not in himself, but in the space. He walked a few steps, then stopped. Just ahead, flight attendant Linda Myers was standing checking the passenger manifest. Linda was in her early 40s. Her hair was tied back, her lipstick was a cool red, and her uniform was pressed to the point of being unwrinkled. She had the confidence of someone used to giving orders, and the sharp gaze of someone who believed she knew which guests deserved to sit where. His eyes swept over Noah, and in that split second Noah knew it wouldn't be easy. "Excuse me," Linda interrupted him. "This area is for first-class passengers." "Yes, I know. I have a ticket." Noah handed her the boarding pass. Linda didn't look at the ticket, she looked at Noah's old shoes, then at the hoodie, then at the backpack. In her eyes, every detail was an accusation. "You hear me, this is the priority area. Economy is over there." Even though he knew he was right, Noah felt his throat dry up. He took a deep breath. He didn't want to cause trouble. He didn't want anyone to notice. I actually have a first-class ticket." He held out the ticket again. This time Linda was a little annoyed, snatched the ticket from his hand, scanned the code. A clear beep sound rang out. The screen shows Carter Noah seat 2A first-class Premier. Linda stood still for a second. Her gaze went from disdain to annoyance, then back to fake professionalism. "Fine, come in." She handed him the ticket, her voice cold as steel. But before Noah entered, she added, "Remember, first-class passengers are expected to behave properly. Don't make me have to remind you." A light remark. But it pierced Noah much deeper, not because of the words, but because of the meaning behind it. "I don't think you belong here." Noah bowed his head in thanks, then went inside. But in his heart a heaviness spread like gray clouds. He sat down on the chair, opened his backpack, and gently touched the sheet music, his only ticket to his dream. He closed his eyes, letting the noise around him drift away. In that moment, Noah whispered very softly, as if talking to himself, "I will not back down, Dad." He didn't know what lay ahead. He only knew that today he would move forward, even if it's just a small step. But it's Noah Carter's step. The first lounge space always has a very special kind of silence. Not the silence of stillness, but a silence that is difficult to describe, the silence of people who are used to being given priority. The silence of light, footsteps, of hands holding a cappuccino without hurry, of confident breathing because they know they belong here. And in that silence, Noah Carter's appearance was like an off-key note. Not harsh, not loud, but enough to make a few eyes stop. Noah stepped further into the lounge, his grip on his backpack strapped tight enough that the veins in his arms stood out under his youthful brown skin. The smell of American-style roasted coffee, with a hint of caramel, wafted from the bar to the left, mixed with the rustling of newspaper. A middle-aged man in a navy blue suit glanced at Noah only for half a second, but that look made Noah want to withdraw his feet. Not out of contempt, but out of surprise, mixed with a hint of confusion, as if he was trying to guess if he had come to the wrong place. Noah bowed his head and headed for an empty seat by the window. Just as he was about to sit down, a woman's voice rang out from behind him. "Excuse me, young man." Noah turned around. It was Linda Myers. In the white light, she looked like someone used to controlling others. And the way she stood before Noah, back straight, eyes unblinking, made him feel as if he had just done something wrong. Noah waited for her to continue. Linda took a deep breath, her voice even and cold. "I need to check your boarding pass again." He was a little startled. "But I just scanned." "I know," Linda replied quickly, "but I wanted to double-check. It's the rules." The words weren't harsh, but the way she said them made it clear to Noah it wasn't a rule that needed to be checked. It was her checking his presence, as if his presence were some kind of aberration that needed to be corrected. Noah handed over the ticket. Linda scanned it again. Another beep, clear, crisp, undeniable. Seat 2A, she read aloud, but her voice was no longer polite. Premier first class. Not an apology. Not a nod of acknowledgement that she was wrong. She just returned the ticket and said, "Sit here, don't cause any misunderstanding to other passengers." The words fell softly, but coldly. It wasn't a warning. It was prejudice wrapped in something called rules. Noah nodded. He didn't want to draw any more attention to himself. But a thin streak of sadness spread inside him like ink on paper. He sat down on the chair by the window. The morning sunlight shone through the glass, creating golden patches on the floor. Noah opened his backpack, took out his water bottle, and took a small sip. His face was still a little red, not from embarrassment but from the indescribable feeling he was trying to swallow. "Why should I bother with this?" he thought to himself. "I can just fly to Boston." But it wasn't that easy. Noah wasn't the first to experience such things. Ever since he was a child, he had been used to having to prove that he was not a troublemaker, that he was polite enough, smart enough, worthy enough. And sometimes that was more tiring than hours of piano practice. Noah glanced down at his old shoes. They had been a gift from his father when he got his first paycheck as a manager back when Jeremiah Carter hadn't become CEO yet. They were the shoes Noah had taken on his first steps on stage in school, playing his first jazz song in front of 200 people. They were old shoes, but they were memories. He didn't want to replace them. But to Linda, they were proof that he didn't belong in this lounge. There are moments when one realizes I'm not wrong, but the world still looks at me as if I've done something suspicious. Noah took another deep breath. He tried to steady his mind. A waiter walked up and smiled. "Would you like something to drink? Orange juice, iced tea?" Noah looked up and smiled lightly. "Orange juice, please." "Okay, honey, wait a moment." The voice, gentle, warm, non-judgmental, surprised Noah. He felt relieved. There were people in the world who saw him for who he was. While waiting for his orange juice, Noah looked out at the tarmac. A Boeing 787 was taxiing, sunlight glinting off its shiny metal. Noah imagined himself standing in the Brighton Conservatory audition room tomorrow, playing the song he wrote about summers spent running around the alleys of South Ridgebrook. He imagined the admissions committee looking at each other at the final note. He imagined himself smiling not because he was overconfident, but because he knew he had dared to try. Noah smiled slightly. In that moment he forgot all the other people's eyes. All that remained was a desire small but real. But that peace did not last long. Linda appeared again. Not quickly, not strongly, but her appearance made the air seem thick. "Noah Carter," she called his name for the first time. He looked up. "Yes? What's the matter?" She looked at Noah's backpack as if identifying a suspicious object. "I need to verify whether there are any illegal items in the backpack." Noah was startled. "What? No, nothing dangerous. Just my music and some personal belongings." "I need to check," Linda interrupted, not waiting for an explanation. Noah was confused. "Ma'am, my sheet music, it's fragile. It's the original." Linda raised her eyebrows. "Are you refusing to follow the instructions of the airline staff?" The question fell like a stone. It doesn't wait for an answer. It forces it. Noah didn't want any trouble. But that sheet music, if it got broken, torn, even a smudge, he wouldn't have a second copy to audition. Noah tightened his grip on his backpack. For the first time, a real struggle was brewing inside him. Should he open his backpack, or protect the most important thing in his life? Suddenly, Noah thought of his father. He thought of the words, "There are times when you have to stand up for what you believe is right. But standing here, will it make things worse?" Noah swallowed. His voice was low but clear. "Teacher, I just want you to be gentle with the music. Just one sentence. No objection, just a request." But Linda sounded like a challenge. "I'll check. If you cooperate, it will be quick." And she reached for her backpack. Noah put his hand on his backpack reflexively. He didn't pull back, just put his hand on it. "Can I take it out myself?" Let me keep it from getting damaged." This time Linda's gaze was no longer unpleasant. It turned cold, the kind of coldness that people only have when they believe they are above others. She spoke slowly, each word like a knock on Noah's mind. "You are obstructing aircraft security procedures." Noah opened his mouth, but nothing came out. In those few seconds, a feeling of helplessness crept into his chest. He missed his father. He missed his father's warning not to let anyone touch his backpack. He also missed his confident smile this morning when he walked into the airport. Everything suddenly became fragile. Noah took a deep breath and let go of his backpack. But instead of accepting it, he just whispered, "Please, don't tear my music sheet." The remark seemed like nothing, but it made Linda pause for a split second, not because she was touched, but because she believed she was right. This boy was hiding something. Noah didn't know. In a few hours, things would spiral out of control. But right now, in that bright lounge, the injustice was beginning to show without shouting, without violence. Just a look, an attitude, a false assumption. And Noah Carter's painful journey has officially begun. The atmosphere inside the first-class cabin of Flight AV 702 was like a different space. Warm yellow lights, wide leather seats that could be reclined into beds, the sound of the air conditioning running as softly as a breath. Everything was quiet and refined, the standard American luxury that Atlantic Vista always advertised. But for Noah, first class today was no warmer than anywhere else. He stepped inside, and before he could even breathe, he heard Linda Myers's footsteps behind him. She wasn't walking fast, but her presence was a dull pressure on the back of his neck. Noah found seat 2A, right next to the window, just a step above seat 1A. Nice seat, nice space. But the atmosphere made him want to shrink away. "Noah Carter," Linda called as he set his backpack down at his feet. He looked up quickly, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. "Yes. What do you need?" She stood right next to me, arms crossed, face expressionless. "Remember, backpacks must be placed in the overhead bin. Not under the seat, yes, but in my backpack there is my music sheet. If I leave it in the luggage compartment, it will easily break." "Rules are rules," Linda replied, her voice even cold and without any hint of negotiation. Noah squeezed her hand. "Can I hold it under my feet? I promise I won't get in the way." "No," Linda interrupted this time, not hiding her annoyance. In the overhead bin, a passenger behind him, a gray-haired man, turned to look at Noah. His gaze wasn't contemptuous, but it wasn't sympathetic either. It was the kind of gaze that said, "You should listen and not make things difficult." Noah bit his lip. His father's voice echoed in his head. "You may not always be right to stand up, but there are some things you can't leave undone. The music, the dream, the audition tomorrow. It's all in that backpack." Noah took a deep breath. "Teacher, can I open my backpack and take out the music sheet to keep for myself? I can put the rest in the overhead bin. Is that okay?" It was a soft offer, polite, and perfectly reasonable. But Linda looked at Noah as if he had just insulted her. "No. I said everything has to be in the overhead bin. No exceptions." Noah paused. "Besides," Linda looked him straight in the eye, her voice low, "no one carries important documents the way you describe." "That's suspicious." Noah's eyes widened. "What do you think I'm hiding? Please cooperate. Don't cause trouble." Her voice wasn't loud, but every word put Noah in the wrong before there was any evidence. Noah didn't want to cause trouble. He just wanted to get on a plane, go to Boston, audition, and hope his life would change. He stood up and opened the trunk, his eyes still on his backpack. Be careful, he said to himself, as if talking to his own heart. Noah lifted the backpack with both hands, gently, like holding a part of a loved one. He had just put his backpack in the overhead bin when Linda squeezed right in. "I'll do a quick check inside. It's routine." Noah quickly raised his hand to stop her. "Miss, sheet music is very fragile." Linda didn't listen. She reached for the zipper of her backpack. Noah reflexively put his hand on hers. Don't open it too hard, I'll open it myself, just a light touch. A harmless, instinctive reflex. But Linda suddenly took a step back, eyes wide as if Noah had attacked her. Don't touch me. Her voice was loud enough for the 3 passengers to turn around. Noah was stunned. He let go immediately. I'm sorry. I didn't mean you just argued with the airline, Linda interrupted. Her voice was colder than the air conditioning. No, please don't tear the music. I'm not being disrespectful. Linda crossed her arms and shook her head. We have a security problem. That statement just loud enough. And dangerous enough. A younger stewardess, Emily Ross, approached looking bewildered. What's the matter, Linda? He stopped me from checking my luggage. He touched me. Linda spoke slowly, word by word, as if constructing the story in her own words. Emily looked at Noah, eyes filled with sympathy from the start. Noah, is that so? He shook his head vigorously. No, I just asked her not to be rough. I didn't attack anyone. Emily looked at Linda. Linda looked at Emily, and Noah sensed something. One was looking for the truth, the other wanted the story to go in a different direction. The atmosphere changed. Passengers whispered. A man took out his phone and started filming furtively. Noah felt his heart beat faster and faster. Teacher. He took a breath, his voice trembling slightly. I just wanted to protect the music. I'm sorry if I made you misunderstand. I didn't mean to oppose you. Linda folded her arms and said coldly, I will inform the pilot. If necessary, we can ask you to leave the plane. The ground beneath Noah's feet fell away. If he got kicked off the plane, tomorrow's audition, his future, his dreams, it would all be gone. Noah didn't want to cry here, but his chest felt heavy as a rock. Emily placed a gentle hand on Noah's arm. Let me talk to her. Calm down. Noah nodded but said nothing. He just stood there, watching the 2 women converse quietly with each other. Not loud enough to be heard clearly, but enough to guess that something terrible was being decided. Noah clenched his fist. The question echoed in his mind, simple but painful. Why is it that just because I am me, things can go wrong so easily? Emily turned back and whispered, just sit down, I'll take care of it. Don't do anything else. Noah sat down in seat 2A. His eyes stared blankly. His hands clenched his knees. Linda stood nearby, arms crossed, like someone watching a potential threat. Noah felt her eyes. They weren't the eyes of someone who cared about security. They were the eyes of someone who believed he was right and wanted everyone else to believe it too. There was a long silence in that moment, a silence that was suffocating, a silence that made Noah want to leave his body. He wished his father were here. Without saying anything, just standing behind him to let him know he wasn't alone. But Dad was hundreds of miles away, and he was alone in a spacious, luxurious seat in what seemed like the safest cabin of the plane. Noah clasped his hands together and bowed his head. He whispered, I can do it. I can do it. But his heart felt uneasy like never before. No one in the cabin knew that things were just beginning. The engine began to vibrate slightly. The air conditioner blew from the ceiling, sending a blast of cool air down the back of Noah's neck. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but his heart was pounding like it was being pushed from the inside. Seat 2A, which should have felt like a place of safety and privilege, now felt as cramped as a locked box. Noah looked out the window. The sky outside was so blue it felt like another place far removed from the chaos he was sitting in. Emily stood at the back of first class, whispering to another male flight attendant. Linda was in the front row, her eyes fixed on Noah. It was a look not worried, not wary, but like someone waiting for someone prove me right. The air in the cabin became heavy, as if something invisible was waiting. The loudspeaker came on. Please fasten your seatbelts. We will be departing in a few minutes. Passengers settled down. End 49. End. The sound of seatbelts clicking echoed. No one knew that in this small first-class cabin, a tragedy was slowly brewing. Noah tried to lean back in his chair. He wanted to hide in the thick cushions as if they could swallow up his worries. But he couldn't. Linda began to move closer. Her heels echoed evenly on the floor, not fast, not slow, but eerily steady. She stopped in front of Noah. "Tell me again," she kept her voice coldly calm. "What do you have in your backpack?" Noah looked her straight in the eye. No challenge. No resistance, just the truth, music, and some personal stuff, nothing else. Linda tilted her head. "Security is no joke, Noah." She emphasized his name as if emphasizing his error. Noah opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a male voice rang out. "What's the problem, Linda?" The person who appeared was Mark Holden, the flight attendant in charge of security support. He was about 30 years old, tall, and looked a little tired, but his eyes were bright and observant. Linda pointed at Noah. "He had an unusual reaction when I checked his luggage. I was worried about something dangerous." Noah turned back. "No, I was just afraid the music would be ruined." Mark looked at Noah for a long time, not believing nor condemning. "Okay," he said softly. "I just need to confirm. Noah, can you open your backpack and show me what's inside? No one will touch it. Just open it." That way of speaking, calm, respectful, not imposing. Noah let out a small breath. "Okay." He reached into the trunk and gently pulled down his backpack. But at that moment the backpack left his hand, Linda stepped in, grabbing one strap. "Let me." Her voice was as sharp as a knife. Surprised, Noah instinctively held on to the other strap. "Wait, let me." "It's just a natural movement to keep balance." But Linda had been waiting for that moment. "Someone call security," she shouted. The scream cut through the cabin like a knife through the still air. Passengers turned around in surprise. Several put their hands to their mouths. One started making phone calls. Mark froze Linda. "Calm down. He snatched my backpack out of my hands. He's resisting." Noah was stunned. "No, it's not like that, But no one listened to him anymore. In a moment he went from a student with music in his backpack to a suspect. Everything spun as if someone had thrown it hard. Mark stepped forward, his voice quick but controlled. "Noah, let go of the backpack strap." "It's okay. I trust you. Just let go." Noah let go immediately. The backpack strap slipped from his hand and fell into Linda's. But the scary thing was, Linda didn't let up. She held the backpack high as if it contained something poisonous. "I'll give this to the pilot. We need to keep the passengers safe." Noah stood up. "Auntie, that's my music sheet. Please don't." "Sit down," Linda shouted. This time her voice was powerful enough to startle several passengers. Noah took a half step back. His hands came up in self-defense. "I didn't do anything. I just asked you to be gentle with the music." "You're disrupting the flight," Linda declared coldly. "Do you know what that means?" The doors of perception in Noah's head closed. He understood very clearly. If Linda labels you a threat to aircraft security, the flight will be stopped. You could be removed from the plane. Or worse, arrested at the gate. But you did nothing wrong. No, the only thing Noah did was try to protect his dream. Emily ran over. "Linda, stop. We haven't verified. No need to verify." "I have the right to prevent risks," Linda said without looking at Emily. Mark stepped forward, blocking Noah and Linda. "Linda, you are overstepping your authority." Linda narrowed her eyes. "I am doing my duty. This boy is acting strangely. He touched me, and now he refuses to cooperate." "No," Noah blurted out, his voice choking. "I was cooperating. I just didn't want the music ruined." Mark lowered his voice. "Noah, just tell the truth. No one is accusing you, but the truth is sometimes not what people believe." Linda suddenly took a step back, her hand on the walkie-talkie in front of her chest. "I inform the pilot. Passenger 2A is acting rebelliously. Please intervene." The air in the cabin froze. Mark jerked his head. "Linda." She can't call in intervention without proof, but it was too late. A click sounded on the walkie-talkie. "This is Captain Rowe. Linda, detailed report." Linda looked at Noah as if in triumph. then said the passenger was acting rebellious, trying to snatch the luggage and not following instructions. I suspected there was a dangerous object. The first-class cabin fell into a deadly silence. The man filming put down his phone, his face tense. Mark turned to Noah and whispered, "Calm down. Don't do anything rash. I'll make sure you're not wronged." But Noah couldn't hear anything anymore. Every sound around him became distant. Audition dream. Practice night. Small apartment. Dad's smile. All is fall into void. A suffocating question arose. Why is it that just one person thinks he is wrong? The world believes it so easily. Captain Rowe and a security guard entered the cabin. Linda immediately stepped forward as the leader of the hunt. "Here, passenger 2A. Noah stood still. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a profound sense of helplessness. Mark stood in the middle, his voice resolute. "Captain, I have not seen any threatening actions from the child." "It is all just a misunderstanding," Linda interrupted. "Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. He touched me when I checked my luggage." Captain Rowe looked at Noah, his eyes considering. "Do you have anything to say?" Noah opened his mouth, but his voice choked. He only said one sentence, simple, light, but touching the bottom of the heart. "I just want to protect my music." At that moment, the first-class cabin was so silent that you could hear someone swallowing. The captain looked at Linda, then at Mark, then at Noah again, and in that silence, a decision that will change the future. Captain Rowe stood in the middle of the first-class cabin, tall blue-gray eyes, the stride of someone accustomed to facing pressure. He was not quick to judge. He did not see Noah as a suspect, but he did not entirely believe him either. He was considering, and for Noah it took a lifetime. Linda stood a few feet away, still clutching Noah's backpack as if holding on to evidence. Emily and Mark stood near Noah, not saying it, but clearly trying to protect him from the growing injustice. The air in the cabin felt compressed, so thick, heavy, and tense that one wrong word would send it all crashing down. Captain Rowe spoke first. "Noah, I need you to calm down. We're going to go through this the right way. Can you tell me what happened?" His voice was low, slow, and without pressure. Noah looked up. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from the effort it took to keep himself from collapsing. "I didn't do anything, sir. I just asked her to be gentle when she checked my backpack. I didn't grab it. I didn't resist. The music in it is very important to me." His voice broke at the last sentence. No one could hear it without feeling their heart tighten. Captain looked at Linda. "Linda, tell me what happened." Linda inhaled as if preparing to go on stage. "I suspected the passenger had a suspicious object. When checking his luggage, he reacted violently, touched me, and tried to grab his backpack." Noah shook his head immediately. "No, I just—" Linda raised her hand to interrupt, her voice raised. "I feel threatened." It was a phrase Linda knew well its power. As long as a flight attendant said I was threatened, the system was always on their side. No proof, no evidence. Just a feeling. And that made Noah feel like the ground beneath his feet was splitting apart. Mark took a step forward. His voice was calm but clear. "Captain, I was standing nearby. I didn't see any threatening behavior from Noah. I was just worried about the music being damaged." Linda turned around. "You stand behind. You can't see everything." Emily also spoke up softly but firmly. "Captain, the girl is very cooperative. I just asked her not to tear the music." Linda sneered. "Oh, of course. You two always take the passenger's side." From seat 1C, an elderly female passenger called out, "I saw it. The boy didn't do anything. He was just shaking." Linda didn't turn around. She just tightened her grip on her backpack as if anyone's words were irrelevant to the conclusion she had come to. Captain Rowe put his hands together in a reassuring gesture. "Everyone calm down. We will handle this properly." He turned to Noah. "Noah, I need you to open your backpack, but you open it yourself. No one touches it. Okay." Those were the words Noah wanted to hear from the beginning. He nodded immediately. "Yes, I agree." I will open it myself. But when he reached out, Linda suddenly pulled the backpack a little closer to her. Wait, I'm not sure it's safe to let him open it without close supervision. Mark was stunned. Linda, how much more is enough for you? Linda turned to Captain. If you let him open his backpack while he's nervous, it's very possible. The captain interrupted, his voice low but authoritative. Linda, that's enough. The whole cabin was silent. Captain turned to Noah. You open it. Noah took a deep breath. He stood up, his hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from too many emotions packed into such a small moment. He put his backpack down on the chair. Slowly, gently, he zipped it up. The sound of a zipper echoed in the cabin like a knife cutting through the tension. Noah opened his backpack. On the top layer was the music sheet, more than 40 pages, bound tightly with rubber bands, the edges slightly worn from his daily touch. He lifted it with both hands as if lifting a piece of his heart. This is everything. His voice was small but clear. Captain looked at the music, then looked at Noah. Do you compose? Yeah. Noah nodded, looking down. I'm writing to audition for Brighton Conservatory tomorrow. A man in seat 3 whispered. The boy writes music. Another woman whispered, oh my God. The sounds were faint, but enough to make it clear. Linda's description of Noah did not match the image before them. Not a dangerous passenger, not a menace, just a boy with a dream. Noah opened the backpack a little more. Inside was only a folded jacket, an old pen, a notebook, a box of granola, and an audition ticket. Nothing dangerous, nothing suspicious. The whole cabin was silent. Captain looked at Linda. You call this suspicious? Linda didn't answer. Her face reddened, not from embarrassment, but from the sense that her authority was being challenged. Captain, Linda said quickly. Even if there was nothing inside, his behavior was still worrying. He touched me. Noah shook his head, his voice choked. I didn't mean to. I was just protecting the music. Linda pointed at Noah. There, look, this behavior, Linda. Captain Rowe's voice hardened. I've heard enough. The whole cabin held its breath. The captain turned to Noah first. His voice softened. Noah, this has gone way beyond what it should have. I did nothing wrong in protecting my things. Noah bowed his head, feeling his throat burn. You can sit down, the captain continued. You are not considered a threat. You are not being asked to leave the plane. A sigh of relief echoed through the cabin. Emily placed her hand on her chest, visibly relieved. Mark chuckled as if he had just crossed a thin line between justice and absurdity. But Linda, her face became tense, like someone about to lose something important. Captain, I object. If we let this go, Linda. The captain's voice was as sharp as a knife. About your position, I will record this in the internal report. Linda stiffened. That was something she couldn't accept. Because for Linda, power wasn't just about her title. It was about her ability to impose her feelings on others and to be trusted unconditionally by the system. She bit her lip, but she didn't give up. What about the backpack? I still doubt, the captain interrupted firmly. There is no doubt. He looked at Noah. You hold it, and lock it for me. Noah zipped up his backpack, his hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but because after several tense minutes he felt like he had just escaped a deep abyss. He hugged his backpack to his chest, like hugging his own breath. The captain stepped out of the cabin. Mark followed him. Linda stood alone. She pursed her lips as if swallowing a bitterness she was not used to facing. She looked at Noah, her eyes no longer filled with suspicion, but with hatred. The look in the eyes of someone who refuses to accept that they were wrong. And it was that look, a small, simple look, but filled with prejudice, that would become the reason for Noah's greatest tragedy in the next part. Because people like Linda, when not recognized as right, will find every way to make themselves right, even if it means destroying someone to do it. The plane began to taxi down the runway. The seats rocked gently with the movement. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm, soft yellow, a false sense of calm. Noah leaned back, his arms hugging his backpack across his lap. He sighed not from exhaustion but from the stress of the situation. Emily walked by and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay, Noah?" He nodded. "Yes, thank you, I'm better." Emily smiled softly like an older sister. "Just sit still. No one will bother you anymore." The sentence hung in the air for a few seconds, then vanished. For in the distance, Linda Myers stood at the back of the cabin, silently watching Noah, not the look of a loser but of someone planning to regain control. Her lips pressed together, her hand smoothed back her hair, then very gently she clasped two fingers like a silent promise to herself. "I won't let him embarrass me." The loudspeaker blared, "Prepare for takeoff." Noah pulled his seatbelt. The plane began to accelerate. The engine roared loudly, forcing him backward. In that moment, a moment when everyone was gasping for breath from the thrust, Linda walked to the front galley area of the plane where Mark was standing checking the safety equipment. "Mark," she called, her voice low. He turned back. "What's the matter?" Linda crossed her arms. "You stay here. I need to check the first area again." "Linda, it's done. We just dealt with—" "I am in charge of this area," she interrupted. "I will ensure security." Her words were full of the implication that Mark had not done enough. Mark looked at her for a long moment, then turned away, giving up. Little did he know that silent permission would become one of the decisions he regretted for years to come. As the plane reached its first cruising altitude and the ding that signaled the release of his seatbelt sounded, Noah finally relaxed. He set his backpack down at his feet just a little to stretch his arms, but before he could even touch his feet to the floor, Linda appeared right in front of him. "Noah Carter." Her voice was like a knife tapping on a table. Noah was startled and stood up reflexively. Is there something else?" Linda didn't answer right away. She looked down at her backpack as if it were evidence of an unsolved crime. "I want to check my luggage again. This time I have to do it properly." Noah took a small step back. "But what Miss Rowe just said was—" "I don't need to repeat myself," Linda interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "Ma'am?" Noah took a deep breath. For the first time during the flight, his voice was clear. "I opened my backpack. Everyone saw it. There's nothing else to check." The first-class cabin fell silent. Nearby passengers turned to watch. Linda took another half-step closer, her voice low but sharp as a knife. "It's not your decision. This is my plane. I'm in control here." Noah stood still. He didn't resist, but he didn't back away either. "You are not this plane," Noah said softly, but his eyes did not look away. That remark, true, gentle, and completely respectful, made Linda blush again, because it touched a nerve with her obsession with power. She reached for her backpack. Noah grabbed the backpack strap reflexively. "Miss, careful, the music." The moment their hands touched, Linda screamed as if she was attacked. Mark security. "Passengers are protesting." The scream pierced the entire cabin like a siren. Mark came back immediately. "Noah, hold still." He rushed forward, not because he believed Noah was wrong, but because he was afraid things would escalate. Noah let go of his backpack and clasped his hands to his chest. "I didn't do anything. Please don't pull so hard." But Linda didn't back away. She grabbed the strap of her backpack and yanked it toward her. The backpack slipped and was thrown aside. Linda gasped as if she had just escaped danger. "See, he wants to attack me." Rows 1A, 1B, 2B whispered in unison. A few raised their phones to record. And in that moment, the moment when everything seemed to be brought to a head, Linda saw something she shouldn't have seen: Mark's taser. It fit neatly in a holster at his hip, safe, locked, reserved for real emergencies. But for Linda, it felt like an opportunity to prove she had been right all along. She slipped past Mark. So fast, he didn't even notice. Linda, no, too late. She ripped the taser from its holster. Her hands shook with adrenaline. Her eyes widened with the excitement of someone who believes she's a hero. Noah stood still, not understanding what was happening. He only saw Linda turn around and raise her hand. The taser was aimed straight at his face. My eyes don't," Noah screamed. Emily screamed. Mark rushed forward. Linda pulled the trigger. The sound that came out was like a small, sharp explosion. The two needles shot out extremely fast, causing the air to tear apart. One end went through Noah's cheek. The other went straight into his left eye. It all happened in less than a second. But Noah heard a heavy thud like a door being slammed shut inside his head. Electric shocks shot through his face. His entire head shook as if it was being shrunk and compressed. Noah didn't have time to scream. He only heard the scream of his own heart. Then he fell. His whole body convulsed, his limbs hitting the chair. Blood welled from his left eye, not in a flow but in a thin stream. Passengers screamed. A woman covered her mouth. A man stood up. Emily rushed over and knelt down beside Noah. "Noah, Noah, look at her. Noah, oh my God." "Mark, call an ambulance quickly." Mark snatched the taser from Linda's hand. He stared at it in disbelief. Then he turned to Linda, her face white with horror. "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" Linda stood there frozen. Her hands were shaking, her lips were quivering, her eyes were wide and lifeless. It was as if she didn't even understand why she had pulled the trigger. He opposes me. I must protect, but no one believes that anymore." Noah lay convulsing. Blood dripped onto the floor of the plane, each drop as heavy as the sound of a crushed heart. He couldn't see anything. Everything was black, dense, deep and cold like a bottomless well. Emily put her hands on Noah's face, her voice trembling as if she was about to cry. "Noah, listen to me. Don't open your eyes. Don't open." He could only hear her voice. He could hear nothing else. He couldn't understand what had just happened. He couldn't understand why. Just because he was protecting the music, he was being treated like an enemy. He tried to say, "Miss, I don't," but the words dissolved into sobs. And in that moment, the once luxurious, once comfortable first-class cabin became the scene of one of the most heartbreaking tragedies of his life. A tragedy that comes not from danger, but from prejudice. A small prejudice. That turned into the biggest mistake of Linda Meyer's life. At the back of the cabin, Mark shouted into the radio, his voice breaking. "Abort, take off, stop immediately. Passenger seriously injured. Call an emergency." Meanwhile, Linda stood alone. No one saw her as a victim anymore. No one was on her side. Her previous defense was now evidence against her. And the last thing Noah heard before passing out was Emily's trembling voice, "Noah, hang on, they're coming." Then he was plunged into complete darkness. Jeremiah Carter's office on the 47th floor of the Carter Energy Building rang with a small ping signaling the end of an online meeting. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the tempered glass, bathing the walnut-paneled room in an orange hue. A long day of negotiating energy contracts had left him exhausted, but when he looked at the photo frame next to his laptop, a picture of Noah playing the piano at age 12, a soft smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He stood up to go out when his personal phone rang. The display shows Noah 10 missed calls. Jeremiah stopped. His heart skipped a beat. Noah never called so urgently, unless... He quickly pressed redial. The machine didn't ring. Only sounds cut through the chaos. People screaming, someone sobbing, a distant siren. Then a female voice, trembling, choked, "Mr. Carter, I'm Emily Ross, flight attendant on AV 702. Sir, please calm down, but Noah is..." Jeremiah spoke immediately, his voice low but sharp as steel. "Let me talk to him." Emily burst into tears. "Sir, Noah, he can't speak. He's badly injured." There was a long silence, so heavy that Emily could hear Jeremiah's breathing change, deep, slow and restrained, as if he were holding something very heavy inside. Then he asked, word by word, "What happened to my son?" Emily held back her tears, but her voice still broke. "A flight attendant. She used a taser, and hit Noah in the left eye. The next sentence was choked between sniffles. He's lost a lot of blood, Mr. Carter. We're heading back to the airport. They're calling a special medical team. Jeremiah didn't move, didn't say anything, didn't scream, didn't ask, didn't curse. He stood in the middle of the luxurious room, which suddenly became strangely small, as if everything around him had no weight. Then he gently placed his hand on the table just to keep himself from falling. There is a pain that one cannot scream out. A pain so deep that the body does not know how to react. Mr. Carter has been through numerous crises: the 2014 oil spill, a contract collapse that rocked the market, a business war with 3 European corporations. But nothing could compare to the words that just rang out. Over the phone. His son was shot in the eye. Emily was still talking, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Carter, Noah is still breathing, but he is in a lot of pain. And, sir, he called your name before he passed out. A hairline crack ran through the steel wall in Jeremiah's heart. He swallowed the salt that caught in his throat. Emily, his voice was low, deep, but powerful. Listen to me. Yes. Have Noah lie on his left side. Place a cold washcloth on his right temple. Do not touch the injured eye. His voice trembled slightly. And, please, tell him I'm on my way. Emily sobbed. Yes, Mr. Carter, I will say. Ended the call, standing still for another second. Just a second. Then his whole being changed. Jeremiah picked up the intercom. Sarah, just one word. But his assistant, who had worked with him for nearly 8 years, recognized the tone immediately. Right here, sir. Less than 5 seconds later, Sarah appeared at the door. Jeremiah looked straight at her, each word sharp. Get the car ready. I need to get to Atlantic Vista Airport immediately. Cancel all meetings for the next 72 hours. Sarah didn't ask why. She just nodded quickly and firmly. But as he walked past her to the door, Sarah caught a glimpse of his hand shaking. Something she hadn't seen in 8 years. She knew this had to do with Noah. And when the Noah thing happens, the business world will hold its breath. The elevator dropped 47 floors. Jeremiah looked straight ahead, not blinking. In his head, Emily's every word repeated like a hammer. Taser, hit in the left eye. Noah was in a lot of pain. Noah called his name before passing out. His chest tightened. His breathing was heavy. He wondered why Noah. The boy had never hurt anyone. He only brought music. Why would a grown man wearing an airline uniform treat his son like a threat? And deep within that pain, another current began to form: anger. There is a kind of anger that is not expressed in shouting but in absolute silence. The silence before the storm. Jeremiah is the kind of person who, when he is silent, the whole market has to watch out. As the car turned onto the highway toward the airport, Sarah asked quietly, "What do you want me to tell the media? Do we need to stop the leak first?" Jeremiah replied after a sigh, "No, don't stop anyone." Sarah raised her head. "Sir." He looked out the window. The street light reflected off his eyes, deep, black, and heavy. Let them see it all. The truth needs no hiding. A pause. His voice turned cold as metal, but notice to the legal department: open the files immediately. I want every internal Atlantic Vista report for the past 10 years. All passenger complaints. All personnel files on Chief Flight Attendant Linda Myers. Sarah sat up straight. "Sir, that means," Jeremiah continued, still looking out at the road. "She knows very well what that means. The car accelerates." The silence in the car was not a normal silence. It was like the sound of the air being sucked out of a room before a bomb went off. Jeremiah closed his eyes, and for the first time that day, he let his heart speak. "Noah, wait for me. Just breathe. I will do the rest." Meanwhile, in the sky, Flight AV 702 was turning around. Emily still held Noah's head in her lap. Blood had stained the towel. Noah's body occasionally jerked slightly, a reflex of shock. Mark ran back and forth looking for more bandages while constantly calling the ground medics. Linda sat alone in the spare seat at the back of the cabin, her hands holding her head. She muttered, "I didn't want to. I just wanted security. I didn't try." But no one came near her. No one. The atmosphere in the cabin was so heavy it seemed like it could be cut with a knife. A businesswoman in seat 1C said tremblingly, "That woman, how could that be?" An old man in a suit in row 2B shook his head. The boy was just holding a backpack. Oh my God, who would do that to a child? Those whispers in bits and pieces were about to become a tidal wave of public opinion as videos from passengers' phones began to be posted online. But no one in the cabin knew that. No one knew that the whole country would be shaken in just 45 minutes. They knew only one thing: Noah Carter was losing consciousness, and they were powerless. And Jeremiah, who was rushing to the airport as fast as he could, had no idea that from the moment Emily answered his call, the fate of Atlantic Vista Airlines has been decided, not by law, not by media, but by the heart of a father, the head of an energy corporation that owns 40% of the fuel used on domestic flights. A black man who climbed to the top of industry through intelligence, through discipline, through patience, and promised his son that the world would be safe for him. That promise was broken, and when Jeremiah Carter's promise was broken, he would rebuild the sky his way, even if the entire old system has to be burned. The afternoon sky at Atlantic Vista Airport was blurred by a gray drizzle. The runway reflected the pale yellow lights like a strip of wet glass. Every few seconds the wind blew, carrying a mixture of sounds: the sound of fading plane engines, the honking of transport vehicles, and the cold echo of airport loudspeakers. But waiting on the runway was a heavy silence. An ambulance stood by, its red and white lights flashing like the heartbeat of the airport. 7 medical staff, in blue uniforms, stood in a row, their faces solemn. No one said anything more. They just looked at the Boeing slowly descending. An employee whispered, "This is Flight AV 702, the captain said to prepare for the highest level of emergency. The person next to him asked, "Is the passenger seriously injured? I heard it's a boy." The group paused. The word baby alone was enough to make everyone feel heavier. Inside the plane, the first-class cabin was filled with a stifling atmosphere. No one spoke loudly, no one moved. Even breathing was cautious, as if afraid of hurting the child lying in the aisle in front of them. Emily held Noah's head in her lap. Her face was tense, her hands shaking slightly, but she didn't let go. She kept wiping the blood from Noah's cheek with a clean cloth, but the blood was coming so fast that the cloth changed color every 10 seconds. Mark knelt beside him, placing the small heart rate monitor on Noah's chest. "SpO2 is dropping," he muttered, his voice filled with unconcealable worry. Noah groaned softly, just a very small sound, but it made Emily want to cry immediately. "Noah, can you hear me? Try to breathe slowly." Slowly, Noah. She was afraid that the boy would faint too deeply and become mentally unstable at that time. No one could guarantee what would happen. Linda sat at the back of the cabin, her hands clasped together. She looked at Noah, then at the floor, then out into the distance. She made no excuses. She didn't dare, because on the floor before everyone's eyes was living proof of an action she could not deny. A passenger leaned over to the person next to him and said very softly, "Poor boy." The other replied, "I don't understand how she could do that." On the plane in front of so many people. Those whispers, though small, reached Linda's ears. Each one was like a cut, but no one cares. The only thing the whole cabin cared about was keeping Noah alive. As the plane's wheels touched the runway, the plane shook violently. Emily leaned closer to Noah, holding his head tighter to cushion the impact. "Noah, we're almost there, you hear me? Hang in there. Just a few more minutes." The boy did not reply. His eyelids were closed, his lips were pale, his breathing became thin and weak. Mark clenched his fists. If he keeps bleeding like this, he's going to go into shock from blood loss." The sentence made Emily want to scream. Why didn't you answer faster? Why didn't you run faster? But the plane finally stopped. The front door swung open at once. A cold wind rushed in, whirling the curtains. Heavy but brisk footsteps came up the stairs. "Medical team here. Where is the patient?" Emily shouted. "Here, Noah Carter. Oh my God, please hurry up." The medical team rushed in, carrying stretchers, first aid kits, and portable lights. A female doctor knelt beside Noah. She looked at the wound and her face darkened. Taser in the eye. Direct penetration. High voltage. "We have to transfer to the hospital immediately." Mark was flustered. "How can I help you? Get oxygen, small mask. The boy is losing his reflexes." Emily jumped to her feet as they put Noel on the stretcher. "Okay, that's right. Go easy." His head. "Please go easy." They pushed the stretcher down the aisle. The wind whipped at my face. The ambulance siren wailed outside. And at that very moment, just as Emily stepped out of the plane door, she saw a figure standing against the wind, his black coat soaked with rain, his deep eyes staring at the stretcher as if trying to pierce through it. Jeremiah Carter. No introduction needed. No name needed. Noah's father just arrived. He didn't run. He didn't scream. He didn't push anyone away. He just walked forward, each step slow and heavy, so much so that the medical team instinctively stood aside. When he saw his son's bloody face, when he saw the red bandages, when he saw Noah's little hand curled up in pain, Jeremiah placed his hand on the arm of the stretcher and gently stroked his son's bloody face, sweat-damp hair. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Noah, I'm here. Son, I'm here." Noah didn't open his eyes, but his lips trembled slightly as if he recognized that voice. A tear fell, not Noah's. It was Mr. Carter's. No one dared to breathe loudly at that sight. Even Emily covered her mouth, trying to stop herself from crying. The doctor said quickly, "Mr. Carter, we need to get the boy to the nearest eye trauma center. No delay." Jeremiah nodded, not taking his eyes off his son. "I'm going with you." He walked along the stretcher to the ambulance door. But just as he was about to get in the car, Mark ran up, panting, "Mr. Carter." Jeremiah turned back. The moment the two men looked at each other, it was not a moment of reproach or anger. Mark said chokingly, I'm sorry. I couldn't stop her in time. I take responsibility." Jeremiah put his hand on his shoulder, an action that left Mark stunned. "I know you wouldn't hurt my child." His voice was calm, but there was something cold as steel beneath that calm. "But I need you to tell me the truth. How did it happen?" Mark looked down at the ground, his hands clenched. "Linda?" She lost control. I yelled at her to stop, but she grabbed the taser from my belt and shot Noah at close range. "No warning?" Jeremiah asked. "No, sir, no. No good reason." Mark shook his head vigorously, his eyes red. "No, sir." At that moment, Jeremiah closed his eyes. Just a few seconds, but enough to mark the end of one thing and the beginning of another. When he opened his eyes, no longer the heartbroken father standing before them, but a CEO who can shake an entire market with just one decision. He said softly but sharply, "Thank you, Mark. I will remember this testimony." Then he turned to the ambulance. The door slammed shut. The car drove away. The red and white lights reflected off the puddles on the runway, shimmering like Jeremiah's eyes, wet with grief and burning with anger. In the distance, near the plane door, Linda leaned against the wall, unable to support her body. She watched the ambulance. Her legs went weak. She wanted to run, wanted to say, "I didn't mean to," wanted to ask for forgiveness, wanted to explain, but every word is meaningless, because in that car was a child whose life she had taken away. And the man sitting next to her was the man who could wipe out her entire airline in 24 hours. She collapsed, her hands holding her head, this time not because she was afraid of being punished. Not because she was afraid of losing her job, but because she knew she had just done something unforgivable. And Jeremiah Carter, in the ambulance, sitting next to his child, was no longer the man he was this morning. His eyes open to a plan. A clear, cold, irreversible plan. Atlantic Vista will pay the price, not just in money, but in their very existence. Because there are mistakes that can't be fixed, there are looks that can't be taken back, and there are fathers, when forced to protect their children, will change the sky. Street Harlan Memorial Hospital glowed with cold white halogen lights, a sterile, quiet place where life and death were just a door away. The ambulance just stopped in front of the emergency gate. The door opened, and the chaotic sound of medical staff rushed out together with the strong smell of disinfectant. Noah Carter, 16, severe eye trauma, possibly penetrating eyeball hemorrhagic shock, a doctor shouted as they pulled the stretcher down. Jeremiah walked alongside the stretcher, keeping his eyes on his son. The paramedics swirled around him like a whirlwind, but he could hear nothing but Noah's ragged breathing. Patient to the operating room immediately. Prepare for intraocular surgery, another doctor shouted. Emily ran to the emergency room door, Noah's blood still smeared on her uniform. When they pushed the stretcher into the internal elevator to the operating room, she stopped, her arms clutching her chest, breathing heavily as if she had just run through a storm. Jeremiah turned his head to look at Emily. It was a brief look, but enough for her to understand that he noticed her effort. "Thank you for keeping it alive this long." His voice was low and restrained. Emily burst into tears. I'm sorry for not protecting the boy better." Jeremiah shook his head very slightly. "It's not your fault." Then he entered the elevator with the doctors. The elevator doors closed. Emily stood still watching, and knew that from this moment on, the war was no longer hers. The sixth-floor operating room is lit by long rows of white lights reflecting off the blue tiles like still water. Noah was wheeled into the operating room. Jeremiah was so close that a nurse had to raise her hand to stop him. "Sir, you can't go in." He paused. His eyes, usually cold and strong in the business world, had a very small but very real weakness at this moment. "My son," he said softly as if exhaling. The surgeon, a dark-haired woman named Rachel Monroe, stepped forward, her eyes firm but sympathetic. "We'll do everything we can, Mr. Carter." "I saw the emergency room scans. The wound is very deep. We don't know the extent of the nerve damage yet." Jeremiah asked hoarsely, chance to keep sight. Dr. Monroe breathed slowly, a sigh that stretched the hallway several meters. "We can't promise. The high voltage from the taser has burned the inside of the eyeball. Most likely, we'll have to try to save the eye structure, but the vision," she stopped seeing. Jeremiah's hands clenched white. "You have to prepare yourself for the worst." He took a deep breath, nodded. The operating room door closed with a dry click. The sound was casual, but to Jeremiah it felt as if the door had just locked his son's world. He sat down in the waiting room. The waiting room was white, neat, and clean, but colder than any room he had ever been in. The second hand on the wall clock ticked mercilessly slow. Jeremiah propped his elbows on his thighs and buried his face in his hands. He tried to still everything, every breath, every tear, every slight tremor of his body. He had to stand firm against much bigger storms, pressure from shareholders, market fluctuations, competitors attacking from behind. But never a day he felt as helpless as now. This is not a financial battle. This is not a contract negotiation. This is a fight to keep the light for his son, a war where he could only sit outside and wait. The phone vibrated. "It's Sarah." Jeremiah answered the phone, his voice low. "Yes, sir." Sarah hesitated. She knew what to say, but she didn't know how to say it. "The legal team is fully assembled. They await your instructions." Jeremiah raised his head, his eyes red but his gaze sharp as a knife. "Get Atlantic Vista's entire complaint history for 15 years. His voice was low, but each word was as heavy as a sledgehammer. Not a single one left out. Yes, sir. And Sarah, he continued, his voice even not urgent but extremely dangerous, are preparing to temporarily stop supplying fuel to all their international routes. If they need to recontract, the cost will quadruple. Sarah held her breath. Sir, this will be a fatal blow to them. Jeremiah looked straight at the operating room door. My son is in surgery because of them. His voice was hardly that of a father but that of a man who held the fate of the airline industry in his hands. Atlantic Vista will have to understand that. I am not seeking revenge. I am simply setting things right. Sarah was silent for a long time and then said softly, I will start the process right away. Call ended. Jeremiah leaned his head back and sighed, not with relief, but because the decision he had just made would shake up the industry. But he has no regrets. Nothing is too expensive when it comes to protecting your child. A moment later, footsteps echoed softly from the hallway. Emily appeared in front of the operating room. She was still wearing Noah's blood-stained uniform, holding the small black backpack she had picked up from the floor of the plane. Jeremiah saw her and stood up immediately. Emily said softly, her voice trembling, Mr. Carter, this is Noah's backpack. I think you should keep it. Jeremiah took it. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it contained the child's whole world. He unzipped it. Inside was a music book held together with a rubber band, the cover stained with blood. On the first page is a line written in pencil by Noah. The first concert is dedicated to Dad. Jeremiah clenched the notebook so tightly his knuckles turned white. He turned to Emily, his eyes bottomless. You were the only one who protected my son today. I appreciate that. Emily bowed her head. I just did the right thing. Jeremiah shook his head. No. You've done more than that, and I'm going to make sure you're not alone in this. Emily bit her lip, tears rolling down. Mr. Carter. The boy was very brave. He didn't scream, he didn't fight. He just kept the music. Jeremiah closed his backpack, a silence so deep that it made the hallway feel several degrees colder. Then he said, I won't let anyone hurt it again. The operating room door suddenly opened. Doctor. Monroe walked out, his mask pulled down to his chin, sweat still beading on his forehead. Jeremiah stood up. Emily held her breath. The doctor removed his gloves and looked up into Jeremiah's eyes. That look carried the truth, a truth no one wanted to hear. Mr. Carter. Her voice was soft but could not hide the heaviness. We did everything we could to save Noah's eye structure. But Jeremiah tightened his grip on his backpack. The doctor continued. The boy's left eye vision was completely lost. The hallway was so quiet that you could hear the air purifier running on the ceiling. Jeremiah did not react immediately. No thrashing, no crying. He just stood there. Like a tall black statue whipped by the wind but not shaken, the doctor continued. We will monitor the eye and brain nerves for the next 48 hours. In the left hand, there is nerve damage that causes tremors. We cannot evaluate long-term. Emily put her hand to her mouth, choking. Jeremiah took a deep breath, very deep. Then he said, his voice low and unwavering, when can I see my child? Right after we move him to the recovery room, about 10 minutes. He nodded. No more words. But something changed in his eyes. Not collapse, not despair, but it is determination. A determination cold, clear, and firm as steel forged in fire. His son had lost some of his light, but Atlantic Vista would lose everything. The door to the recovery room swung open with a sound as light as a breath, but to Jeremiah it sounded like the unlocking of his entire life. In the white room, the soft light reflected off the walls, creating quiet streaks of light like water waves. In the middle of the room, Noah lay motionless on the hospital bed, the left side of his face wrapped in thick white bandages covering the forehead down to his cheekbones. His left hand, the hand that had once glided like the wind on the piano keys, was secured with a thin splint. Jeremiah stood in the doorway. He didn't go in right away. He looked at his son for a long, long time, as if trying to remember every moment. Noah had laughed, run, played the piano, so that the sight before him wouldn't be too much of a blow. A nurse whispered, "Mr. Carter." The boy woke up a few minutes ago, but he's still weak. "You can come in." Jeremiah nodded slightly. He pulled a chair close to Noah's bed. Sat down, didn't touch right away, just looked. Noah's breathing was weak and uneven. A moment later his right eyelash trembled. Then Noah opened his eyes. His vision was hazy and heavy. He tried to turn his head, but the pain jerked him to a stop. Noah whispered, his voice as weak as a thread, "Dad." Jeremiah leaned forward. He placed his hand on his son's shoulder so gently that he seemed afraid the touch would break Noah. "It's me, Noah." His voice was hoarse. Noah swallowed hard, then asked the question Jeremiah knew was coming, but still couldn't prepare for. I can't see anything on the left anymore." A long silence seemed to fill the room. Jeremiah placed his hand on his son's cheek, the part that wasn't bandaged. He didn't rush to answer. He had to swallow his own pain before speaking. "Yes, Noah," he whispered. "The doctor said you lost the sight in your left eye." Noah's lips trembled. His chest heaved. A tear fell onto the pillow. "So, I can never see clearly to either side again." His voice choked up. "Can't see the person playing with me, can't see the music on the left side of the music stand." Jeremiah squeezed his son's hand. "Noah," he spoke slowly, each word laying brick by brick as he rebuilt the boy's world. "You haven't lost everything. You still have your father, you still have your music, you still have your life ahead of you." But Noah shook his head weakly. "Dad, I don't know what to do. I'm scared." Jeremiah leaned down, letting his forehead lightly touch his son's. It was a small gesture, but to him, it was the only thing that kept Noah from sinking into that despair. "You don't have to be strong right now. You just need to breathe. The rest, leave it to me." In that moment, in the cold room, in the dim light and the steady beeping of the monitor, was a promise. A promise that Jeremiah did not say aloud, but the whole room heard. "No one is allowed to take anything more from my son." A few minutes later, when Noah had fallen into an exhausted sleep, Jeremiah stood up. He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. And half a second after the door closed, his face was no longer that of a grieving father, but the face of a general. Sarah was waiting at the end of the hall, holding a stack of documents in her hand. She walked quickly back. "Mr. Carter, we have collected all the complaints related to Atlantic Vista." Jeremiah nodded. How much Sarah swallowed. More than 1,300 complaints in a decade, of which 18% were related to service attitude, 6% were related to discrimination. And she held up the last stack of papers, breathing heavily. 3 internal complaints about Linda Myers's abusive behavior in the past 2 years, all ignored by the company. Jeremiah's face was expressionless, but his eyes dark. "Send it all to the legal team. They have to start civil proceedings tonight." Sarah nodded. "What about the fuel supply contract, sir?" Jeremiah answered immediately without thinking. "Full credit lock. Any company that wants fuel, pay 100% in advance by international transfer." Sarah took a deep breath. That would cripple Atlantic Vista for the next few hours. Jeremiah looked straight toward the recovery room. Noah lay there, a white bandage covering his eyes. "No." His voice was low but resonant like forged metal. "That will make them understand that my son's blood is not something they can ignore with an internal report." Sarah's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, then panicked. "Mr. Carter, the media has video from the AV 702 passenger. It's going viral. Over 3 million views in 30 minutes. Jeremiah was not surprised. He closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. Then he opened his eyes, and the gaze was different. Sharp, cold, without a single grain of emotion. Let them see, he said. No blocking, no removal, no correction. Sarah looked up. Sir, that would create the biggest media crisis in the airline's history. Jeremiah turned away. His voice was low and steady. That is the purpose. Meanwhile, back at Atlantic Vista headquarters, CEO Howard Grayson was frantically calling the Fuel Partnership Department. No way! Why did BGE freeze our credit? He yelled. Call them back, say it was a mistake. But everyone on the other end of the line only replied with one sentence: direct orders from the president of Carter Energy, no exceptions. Howard threw the phone on the table, his face pale. Oh my God, what have we done? An assistant ran in holding an iPad showing passenger video of Linda using a taser to shoot Noah. Sir, you need to see this. Howard watched. His face grew paler and paler. And when he finished, he could only breathe out 3 words: we're done. Back to the hospital, Jeremiah walked to the window at the end of the hallway. It was dark outside. The streetlights reflected off the glass, streaking it like tears. Sarah stood behind him, not daring to say anything more. And without turning back, Jeremiah said, Sarah. Yes, sir, tomorrow. Contact the Department of Transportation. I want to request a full investigation of Atlantic Vista. Sarah nodded. And? Jeremiah continued. His voice was so low it almost drowned out the hum of the air conditioner. Prepare a draft for a long-term suspension of the contract. We will completely stop supplying them with fuel. Sarah choked. Mr. We have so framed to line. Sarah choked. Mr. Carter. That statement will kill the company. Jeremiah turned back. In his eyes, no more hesitation, no more fear, no more resentment. Only a father's determination remains. An airline that lets black children get shot with tasers doesn't deserve to fly. No one dares to argue with that statement, because it's true, and because it's not just the words of a CEO, it's the words of a father. Dr. Monroe walked out of the recovery room. Mr. Carter, Noah needs to rest. But he also needs to know that the world out there is still on his side. Jeremiah turned. Pressure, pain, anger, everything was in his eyes. He said softly, No, the world is not on his side. He slowed down in front of his son's door. But his father does. And that was the moment the hospital hallway fell silent. A storm has awakened, not a storm of uncontrolled anger, but a storm of a man who knows how to fight back with righteous power. From here on out, Atlantic Vista will no longer be dealing with a passenger. They will be dealing with Jeremiah Carter. And everyone in the airline industry knows no one survived after angering him. The next morning, Street Harland Memorial Hospital was bathed in pale sunlight. The air was mild, but in recovery room 14 where Noah lay, the pain had not yet subsided. Noah was still asleep under the pain medication. Jeremiah sat beside the bed, his hands clasped together, his eyes fixed on his son's face. Not speaking, not moving, just looking, as if he was afraid that if he looked away for a second, Noah might disappear from this world. A nurse came in to check the monitor, bowed her head slightly. Mr. Carter, the boy is stable, but still very weak. Jeremiah nodded. Thank you, but said no more. As soon as the door closed, his phone vibrated loudly in his pocket. Sarah called. He stood up and walked out into the long white hallway where the light from the windows cast long cold streaks. Report. His voice was low and calm, but anyone who heard it could feel the steel weight hidden beneath that calm. Sarah replied quickly. Sir, the passenger video from Flight AV 702 has reached over 58 million views in just 12 hours. Twitter, newsfeed, TikTok, Facebook, it all exploded. Jeremiah closed his eyes for a second. Not with joy or satisfaction, but because the truth was finally clear to the nation. What about public feedback? He asked. Sarah took a breath. You don't want to know. There's a hashtag to break up Atlantic Vista. There's a petition that got over 1 million signatures in 3 hours. She paused, then said slowly, and the entire Federal Aviation Commission is calling for an urgent investigation into the airline. Jeremiah opened his eyes. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. Good. He need not say more. Across town, Atlantic Vista headquarters was a mess like a smashed beehive. Phones ring constantly, email screens turn red, employees run down the hallways like they're evacuating, not going to work. CEO Howard Grayson stood in the conference room, his face pale, his hair disheveled, his tie loose. "They locked it all," he yelled at the finance manager. "Yes." BGE announced a suspension of all fuel contracts requiring 100% upfront payment and at 4 times the price. "We can't afford it," Howard slammed his fist on the table. "We're out of money." The head of the legal department trembled as he handed over a piece of paper. "Here, they just sent a summons. The Ministry of Transportation requires us to submit all training records, employee complaints, internal reports." Howard tore the paper and threw it on the table. "It's all because of that damn video." But then the assistant rushed in, his face pale. "Sir, you should see this." She handed over the iPad. Howard looked on. The screen was broadcasting the early testimony of Senator Ruth Manson, who is known for being outspoken on issues of racism. The camera zooms in on her. The host asked, "What do you think about the passenger video of a black teenager being attacked with a taser on a plane?" Mrs. Manson replied, her voice direct but calm. "It was not a mistake. It was a systematic failure, fostered by the indifference of the airline's leadership. And they will be held accountable." The audience applauded. Howard put down the iPad, his hands shaking. "We are finished." No one objected. While the entire airline was in chaos, the hospital became a place of strange peace. Jeremiah stood at the coffee machine in the hallway. He pressed a button. The machine hummed softly. A young female reporter recognized him from afar. She hesitated a bit but still approached Mr. Carter. "Sorry to bother you." She put her hand to the microphone. "Do you have anything to say to the public about Noah's case?" Jeremiah looked at her. His eyes were not angry, not afraid, not avoiding. He just said, "I don't want revenge. I want the truth. I want my son to be respected like anyone else on the plane." The reporter was silent. "Are you angry?" Jeremiah replied after a deep breath. "I am the father. I am more hurt than angry." Then he left, leaving the girl standing still. That quote just a few hours later became a quote shared millions of times on social networks. Night falls. The hospital lights were square, pale yellow, reflecting on the floor like small windows opening into the loneliness of each patient. Jeremiah sat next to Noah. The boy was awake, but his eyes were still weary and confused. "Dad," Noah called softly. "It's me." Noah raised his right hand, groping lightly in the air as if searching for a fulcrum. Jeremiah took his son's hand and squeezed it gently. "Noah, you are not alone." The boy swallowed his eyelashes, trembling. "Dad, that airline, they won't do that to anyone else, will they?" Jeremiah looked at his son as if he were a fading star. "No," he replied. "I will make sure of that." Noah was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "I don't want anyone else to be like me." Jeremiah placed his hand on his chest. "I promise you, an unwritten promise, but it was stronger than any contract Jeremiah had ever signed in his life." 8 p.m. Sarah ran into the hospital panting, but her eyes bright. "Mr. Carter, there is something you must know immediately. What's up? Atlantic Vista is collapsing." Jeremiah stood up. Sarah opened her laptop and showed it to him. Airline stock price drops 40% in 6 hours. 12 flights canceled. Pilots and flight attendants quit en masse. Many airports refused to let them take off due to lack of fuel. Then she moved on to a newly posted video. Linda Myers, the chief flight attendant, was escorted from her home by police. The media swarmed. Flashbulbs exploded like small thunderclaps. Linda cried, trying to cover her face. The reporter shouted, "Do you have any words for the Carter family? Do you have any remorse? Why did you attack a teenager?" Linda choked. I didn't mean to. I'm scared, but no one believes." The video spread like wildfire. Jeremiah stared at the screen for a long moment. Not happy, not elated, just tired. Sarah asked Mr. Carter, "Do you want to speak or let the lawyer handle it?" Jeremiah shook his head. "No," he said slowly. "Not yet." "So, what's the next step?" Sir Jeremiah looked toward Noah's recovery room, where the child slept, the child he had promised to protect at all costs. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin the process of acquiring the Atlantic Vista assets." Sarah's eyes widened. "You intend to buy the airline?" Jeremiah replied. "I didn't buy it to save them." He placed his hand on Noah's backpack, his eyes dark. "I bought it to shut them down forever." Sarah stood still, not daring to say anything. Because, in Jeremiah's voice, there was not a single grain of fluctuation, only the absolute certainty of a father who has lost too much. That night, as the internet continued to explode, as Atlantic Vista sank, as public opinion called for changes in the airline industry, Jeremiah returned to Noah's room and sat down next to his bed. He gently touched his son's hair. "Noah, go to sleep. Tomorrow will be a new day." Outside the window, the night wind tapped gently on the glass. In that fragile light, the beginning of an end was quietly taking shape. An end for Atlantic Vista, and a new beginning for Noah. That morning the sky over Boston was a rare pale blue. The air was clear and quiet, as if the whole city were holding its breath, waiting for something important to happen. In Street Harland Memorial Hospital, the morning light cast a soft, warm golden glow on the edge of Noah's bed. Noah sat propped up on pillows, his right hand lightly gripping the edge of the blanket, his left hand still in a splint but shaking less. He looked out the window with his right eye, the only eye that could still see the world. He whispered, "The weather looks so nice today, Dad." Jeremiah sat next to him, nodding slightly. "Yes, as beautiful as the day you were born." Noah smiled, a weak but genuine smile. In seconds, the room was filled with no more pain, no more worry, just the peace that father and son had been waiting for so long. The door opened. Sarah entered, carrying a thick file. She set it down on the bedside table. "Mr. Carter, it's done." Noah tilted his head. "Complete what?" Jeremiah looked at his son and smiled gently. "Noah, remember how I said I wouldn't let this happen to any other child?" Noah nodded. He remembered. Very well. Jeremiah opened the file. On the first page was the new logo, deep blue, 3 intersecting circles, Carter Foundation for Safe Skies. Noah rolled his eyes. "Dad, is this yours?" "No." Jeremiah shook his head slightly. "This is mine." Noah was silent. "This fund," Jeremiah continued, "will provide legal assistance to any passenger who is discriminated against on an airplane, and you will be the one to inspire it." Noah looked down at his left arm in a splint. One hand was no longer steady. One eye was no longer whole. And he asked, "But what else can I do?" Jeremiah put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Noah, you are still Noah. Even though you have lost part of your light, you still have a heart to see the world." The boy bit his lip. A tear fell, but this time not from pain, but from understanding. Sarah smiled. "You don't know, Noah. Ever since that video came out, the whole country's been talking about you. They don't call you a victim. They call you the boy who changed the skies." Noah's eyes widened. "But I was just trying to protect my music." "That's why," Sarah said softly. They were touched. A few hours later, the hospital allowed Noah to leave for a short time, as long as he was accompanied. Jeremiah took his son down to the small garden behind the building, a stone walkway, and a row of ginkgo trees shedding their leaves. The wind blew gently, the leaves swirled and fell before Noah's feet. He bent down to pick one up. "Dad," Noah said, hesitating, "I want to ask you something. Are you mad angry that I wasn't strong enough to protect myself?" Jeremiah paused. He turned to look at his son, who was older than he had thought and weaker than he would have liked. "Noah." He put a hand on his shoulder. Do you know what makes me most proud? He shook his head. It's not that I'm strong, Jeremiah said. It's not that I'm good at the piano. It's not that I'm good or diligent. He squeezed Noah's shoulder gently. I'm most proud of you because you didn't give up. I'm proud of you for being you, even when you were hurt. Noah bent down, tears falling onto his hands. Jeremiah pulled his son into a hug. A light but firm hug, just enough to hold Noah in that moment, and enough to make him feel I am still whole, even though I am not perfect. That afternoon, Jeremiah left the hospital to attend the biggest press conference of his career. The lobby of the Boston Plaza Hotel was filled with reporters. The lights were as bright as day. The camera was focused on the podium where a microphone was ready. When Jeremiah stepped out, all was silent. Mr. Carter wore a black suit and gray tie, his face serious but not cold. He had not come to declare war but to close a painful chapter for America. He put his hands on the podium. He looked straight at the hundreds of reporters and said, "Today I am pleased to announce that Carter Energy has completed the acquisition of Atlantic Vista Airlines assets." A wave of commotion swept through the room. Jeremiah continued, "We didn't buy it to continue operating it. We bought it to end a model that has allowed discrimination to persist for too long." The whole room went silent. He said each word clearly. Atlantic Vista Airlines will officially close permanently. The flashbulbs continued to flash. No one gasped. No one objected. No one spoke up for the company. Because the truth is so clear, Jeremiah continued. But this is not the end. The Carter Foundation for Safe Skies will be created to protect every passenger regardless of gender, color, or background, so that no child will have to go through what my son went through. His voice trembled slightly on the last sentence, not from weakness but from sincerity. A reporter raised his hand. "Mr. Carter, do you hate Linda Myers?" Jeremiah looked straight at her, not avoiding her gaze. "I don't hate anyone. I just can't stand silence in the face of injustice." The whole room applauded. Not the loud kind, but the applause of people who had just heard something true. It was dark when Jeremiah returned to the hospital. He opened the door to find Noah sitting by the window, the streetlight illuminating half of his face. Noah turned back. "Dad is home." Jeremiah smiled. "Yes, Dad's home." Noah looked down at his splinted left hand, then looked up. "Dad, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I can play the piano anymore." Jeremiah walked over and sat down next to him. "Noah, you don't need eyes to make music. You only need your heart." The boy smiled softly. "Dad always says that because it's right." Noah thought for a moment, then said, If I can't go back to playing the piano, I still want to help other people." Jeremiah put his hand on his son's back. "That's what I wish you would say yourself." Outside the window, a gentle breeze blew. The ginkgo trees swayed gently, the yellow leaves falling like little songs. Noah watched the leaves fall. "Dad, I can't see them with my left eye anymore, but with my right eye, they're beautiful." Jeremiah smiled, a rare smile, gentle and proud. "Sometimes, Noah, seeing half is enough to understand the whole sky." The boy leaned his head on his father's shoulder. Father and son looked out at the night sky. No words, no need to say anything, because that moment is healing. One chapter closes, another opens. Imperfect but hopeful. Hope is very real and very human. Thank you for following this story to the end. If this story touched you in any way, whether it was anger, compassion, or hope, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel to continue these deep emotional journeys with me. Because sometimes, just one timely story can make us see the world through different eyes.